Could I just ask everybody to turn their videos on just for a second, just to keep them a little bit longer before I start the presentation, please? Because I've got a question for you and I need to be able to see your hands, okay? Way back in July 2019, I gave a workshop at SCiO in London, and it was an in-person workshop. And my question is this: how many of you were there? If you were there, can you put your hand up? Tony, Benjamin.
Where, sorry?
It was in London,
No.
July. It was in the BT building. Okay.
So pre-COVID.
Oh,
then.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Ah, 04. Oh my goodness. Well, that's kind of more than I expected, I guess. Because this is essentially a follow-on. For those of you that were there, what I gave was a workshop on causal loop diagramming. And it was kind of some bait to see if any of you were going to be interested in helping me with my big mission. And my big mission was to teach children and young people what we knew. And at that point, a couple of people turned up to help me, neither of whom could be here this evening. I asked them to come along and they couldn't come. One was Bill Tate, you might know Bill Tate, and the other was Steve Whitler. And both of them have been instrumental in terms of the development of some of the things that you're going to see this evening. So I think, you know, they're not here, they send their apologies, but just so that you know that some of this has involved other SCiO people as well. All right. Okay, well, I'm going to share my screen now. And it did work when we tried it. So let's see. Can everybody see that? Yeah. See if I can make it go into presentation mode. It always takes a little while. Here we go. Okay, so the title of this talk is Cave Drawings and Campfire Conversations, How to Relocalize Creativity in Your Neighbourhood. And what I'm going to cover, the way I'm going to do it is like this. I'm going to talk a little bit about me, because not all of you know me. Very few of you were there the last time we got together. Why I'm here, which is essentially to help make the world a better place. How I'm going to do that through one big idea, everybody being able to see the systems that they're a part of. Where am I going to do it? Well, pretty big ambition here. The whole world, which we reckon is probably about 1 million neighbourhoods. Who am I trying to work with? Well, community activists and still young people. When? Well, basically, as long as any of us care, and as long probably as I'm breathing. What I've done, what I've learned, what I plan to do next is basically what I'm going to share with you this evening. And then I'm going to talk a little bit how you might be able to help. So I'm back on a fishing trip, a big warning there. It's okay, about me. I recently found this. It was something I wrote when I was 10 years old. And it says, basically, my ambition is to either be a teacher or a librarian. But I think I'll change my mind and not be either. Well, I was correct. And then you can see there's quite a lot there about loving animals. Yeah, still love animals. And I've been and visited some of these countries and seen animals. And animals have been a big part of my life. And whilst I wasn't labelled a teacher, actually, I think that's what I am. And I think that's what all of us actually are too. In fact, I think everybody in the world and everything in the world is a teacher, if we choose to see it in that way. But this is actually how it turned out. So I did a first degree in maths and a master's in operational research at Lancaster University. And in '85, I joined Deloitte Haskins & Sells, a small consultancy in London. I stayed in that consultancy and in the group that I was in for 20 years through to 2005. The ambition of the group was basically to take any new analytical approaches coming out of universities around the world and make them applicable to business, using these newfangled laptops, personal computers. They weren't quite laptops then, they were called personal computers, and they were definitely wouldn't fit on your lap. They were a lot bigger than that. And it was there that I learned about system dynamics in 1987. My boss, Dennis Sherwood, brought over Barry Richmond from the States. And I was one of the first people to use the first version of Stella in anger with a lot of my clients to develop models of their businesses. I was to stay, as I say, with Deloitte for 20 years, but Deloitte changed. We merged with Coopers, then Price Waterhouse, and then finally IBM took us over in 2003. And I quit in 2005. I left because I didn't like what I'd seen, okay? I did not like what I'd been shown in my career. And I decided to leave completely the system that was the UK and my career in consulting. I went to live in France. That was my big escape. Sold up completely and went with my horses. You can see my 2 horses on the slide there, and started playing with my horses in France. And I wrote a book about a lot of what I was doing with my horses called Riding Dynamics, because basically I was taking what I'd learned about system dynamics and applying it to improving the training of my horses. So essentially trying to create a united system with a horse is what I was looking at. I went on to work for other businesses that I would never have been able to work for in a big consultancy because they couldn't have afforded our fees, lots of small startups, and especially small businesses in my area of interest, which was generally horses at that time. So horsey startups. I worked a little bit freelance for KPMG, went back and did quite a bit of government work with them. And then I started to get worried, because I started to worry about what was happening, because me just leaving hadn't really changed anything. And I wasn't leverage point in that system. And I decided that I needed to do something. And my big idea was this big idea about bringing what we knew to children. And that led me to all sorts of things, and ultimately to SCiO in 2019, a PhD at Hull University, to measure the impact of what I was doing on children in the UK. And then COVID struck, and it was pretty big. It shut down everything I was doing. I was doing lots of experiments in UK schools, and that all stopped. But actually, I was really glad in retrospect that that stopped, because actually it needed to stop because it wasn't really going anywhere. And what I did from there is basically start something that I called originally See the Systems, which was all about taking Oxford University's Map the System and opening it up and making it applicable to children and focusing it on neighbourhoods. So essentially trying to convert children into community activists using systems approaches. That didn't go down very well with teachers, I have to say. It was not good. That didn't go down well. And then finally, having tried a lot of different things to get teachers to help kids to become active in their neighbourhoods, I rejected that and started working on this initiative, Relocalize Creativity, which is essentially about helping community activists, not teachers, to help change their neighbourhoods, to bring people together and to bring on the young people behind them. Okay, so that in a nutshell is what I've been doing. I worked for a hell of a lot of organisations over the 40 years that I've been working. And I think, Alison, you'll see there, I did a hell of a lot of work in government at one time. It's really discouraging to hear that maybe none of it ever came to anything, because I did a lot of work in the Ministry of Defence, a lot of work as well in the Ministry of Justice, plus assorted bits and pieces elsewhere. And I think that's quite important to note, this bits and pieces thing. In my experience, the big problem with anything that I did with government was the boundaries that were drawn around things, and the lack of understanding of the whole and what the whole means. And we'll be talking about that again a little bit later. I've also worked in lots of different countries, quite a lot of different countries with those stars all over the world. So I've seen a hell of a lot of things. And that's been both enriching, and it's kind of been a problem for me, because I think I kind of got a view of the system that not that many people have had. And it made me really want to do something about changing the world and changing what I was doing, because it certainly wasn't working. It certainly wasn't improving quality of life for people. Essentially, everything I did was about what I call the 3 X's. anything I did, it was labeled in lots of different ways, strategy, performance management, you name it. It was always about this. It was always about helping whoever I was working with to understand their experiences and to be able to pool their and explore their experiences so that they developed a joint understanding of what they were trying to do, how it all worked, and then to be able to identify leverage points for what they might do differently. And then to realize that everything that they did around those leverage points would be experimental. That going out there, we don't really know what's going to happen. And so we have to be very careful in terms of how we craft our experiments and learn from them. And then that's back to experience again. Okay, so essentially everything I do and have done in my private life, my public life, my client life has been always about this. And despite that, despite everything I've done, we've still got all these massive problems in the world. I mean, look at this. We've got 2011, a report there. I think we've got all these problems still, you know, now 2024, they're all still persisting. Back in 1972, we had the Limits to Growth report. All those problems were known back then as well. So the big question for me is this question: why do the world's biggest problems persist? Why do these things persist when we're so aware of them and have been for so long? Now, various people have talked about it and have proposed certain things. For example, Edgar Morin, he talked about reforming education, that this is where the root cause of our problems are. To recognize and understand the problems of the world, we need a reform in thinking. It's the fundamental question for education, okay? Albert Einstein said something similar, I think before that. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Yeah. We've all seen that many times. And Peter Senge's today's solutions, tomorrow's problems. Basically, unintended consequences. Yeah, unintended consequences of interventions. And then generally, when I've looked around at people, what I've seen the solution or the intervention to be has been basically, well, let's have a good old complaint. Let's all talk together about what's wrong. Let's really complain about it. Let's find somebody to blame. Yeah, it can't possibly be us. It's got to be somebody else. And ideally somebody in power somewhere. And then let's protest to them. Let's get out there and protest. And, you know, Greta Thunberg has done a lot of work on that, the complaining, blaming and protesting. But it doesn't actually change anything, does it? You know, we can sit around and talk to other people. We can blame other people and we can protest, but nothing is going to change as a result of that. And in fact, I came to realize that essentially that behavior is all about avoiding change and perpetuating bad behavior, because actually I think we're all terrified of it. Yeah, we're terrified of change. And what we do is therefore we do little things. We try and find ways of carrying on with our really bad habits. And what we do is we then call those solutions. Generally, they're about making more money for somebody else or myself, ideally. But, you know, this is what it's all about and seems to be about. And all we keep doing is making these problems worse and worse and worse. And generally, we believe that somebody else ultimately will fix it for us, that some higher power, some government, who knows, God, is going to come along and fix it for me because it's not my responsibility. My responsibility is quite simply to just follow rules, okay? Because that's what I was taught to do at school. It's what education does. Education taught me that there were answers that other people know, and that if I follow the rules, I will not get blamed myself. I will not be marked down myself, okay? This is a big part of what happens in our culture. And that leads to really big problems. So Greta Thunberg there talking about fires, there was a mighty big fire in London. I think it was back in 2018. And that mighty big fire, there was a lot of uproar about, and essentially the usual thing, well, who caused it? Well, I wasn't really interested in who caused that fire. I was interested in why people died. And essentially, the analysis that I did on all the data that was available taught me that the reason that people died was because they followed rules. They did not look at the system for themselves. They did what they were told, and they paid the penalty in Grenfell Tower. And essentially, I think we're all sitting on top of Grenfell Tower right now. All these problems are all a fire underneath us. We think that they're a long way away. We like to think that they are. I don't think that they are. I think that they're incredibly close. And I think until we start taking all of this seriously and start taking action for ourselves individually, things will never change, okay? And essentially what we're doing now is incredibly expensive, not just for us as individuals, but for the planet, for our home, okay? Now, what do I think are the problems? Where are the leverage points here? Well, I think a lot of the problems are big focus in corporations on shareholder value. That's not necessarily a problem when you've got a small business with few shareholders who know each other. The big problem comes when you get the disjoint, when you get huge numbers of shareholders that turn a corporation basically into a tragedy of the commons, is what I've seen happen time and time again. I see most businesses optimizing a part, that part being their part of the system, trying to either externalize costs, pushing them away to another part of the system, or pushing them away in time down the line for somebody else to deal with, so that I optimize my short-term business performance, is what most of the organizations that I've worked with have tried to do. Loss of community. I've seen it here. I'm sitting here in Wombwell, in South Yorkshire. Wombwell used to have a thriving high street, lots of local businesses. Basically, there aren't really any local businesses anymore. There are small versions of big businesses like Tesco's local, and a few pubs, you know, to help people to drown their sorrows and do a bit of complaining and blaming. But other than that, and just a few charity shops, of course, and betting shops. But other than that, there isn't the thriving high street that I used to see. There isn't the community here that there used to be when I was young and I knew everybody on this road. I don't know anybody. My mother has lived here all her life and she doesn't know anybody on this road other than her immediate neighbours. And it's fine to focus on growth, which is what we keep trying to do, but we've got to focus on growing the right things, not the wrong things. And I see us growing a lot of the wrong things and not really thinking about the consequences of that. Now, Mark, who's my partner on Relocalizing Creativity, he likes to ask any audience that we're with these three questions. So I'd like you just to take a couple of minutes to think about these questions. Who is we for you? Where is home for you? And how long will we care? And pop it into the chat. So what do you define as we? What do you define as home? And how long are you going to care about that? I can't see the chat, so I don't know when you've all finished, but I'll just give you a little time just to think about that. Okay, I'm going to move on from that, because essentially after people have written down whatever it is that you've written that I can't currently see, Mark will then say this, that these questions are always already answered and they're always too small for the problems that we're facing, that this is the issue. The boundaries we place around who we define as we, where we define as home, and how long we decide that we're going to care. Okay, well, that makes sense. Okay. And essentially, we created Relocalizing Creativity, not to say that any of these things that I've put here are wrong, that it's wrong to repeat, and it's right to be creative, it's wrong to be individual and right to be collective. No, it's to say that we've got out of balance here. On all of these things, we're way out of balance. And the big thing that we've got out of balance is way down there, the balance between big business and government and neighbourhoods, communities. And what we're trying to do is to change that balance, to help neighbourhoods take their power back and to start to be able to operate as resilient learning systems themselves. That's what we're all about. So it's essentially taking everything that we've learned from working with businesses and giving everything that we've learned to ordinary people to help them to improve their communities, okay? And one big idea, seeing the systems that we are part of, and back to my usual banging the drum about being able to map the system. You'll have seen these as causal loop diagrams. I'm now calling them community loop drawings. So trying to give words that most people will find more meaningful, as opposed to anything too technical, and teaching people how to do this, how to be able to share their experiences of their community and the way it works. So instead of complaining and blaming, they can start to identify things that they can do together, things that they can do differently to make their community, their world, a better place. And we use this term cave drawing. I believe that way back, in the caves, we would have sat down and drawn pictures of the systems that we were working with. Well, we like to think of community loop drawings as cave drawings for the 21st century, the modern version of that. And the way that they're created is through campfire conversations. The point being that we have to have a dialogue, but it's not an argument, it's not blaming, it's about openly sharing what we know so that when we pool all our truths, we can all learn from each other and be able to identify much better ways of working and operating together and understanding each other too. Really, really important. So basically, as I said at the start, we're looking to bring this to every neighbourhood in the world. And you can say, well, that's kind of crazy. But we're starting with one. And we've been working with one neighbourhood now for quite a while, for quite a number of months. And the community activist there that we've been working with is a guy called Chris Casillas. What I'm going to do now is see if I can use this tech and let him talk to you for a little bit, for just a short period. Let's see if this is going to work. Can everybody see this?
Yeah, we can see it. I don't
you can see it. Okay.
Share sound.
Right.
Share the screen.
Yeah.
At
the moment, I'm just still seeing the slide.
Yeah, I'm not seeing his presentation or him talking to me. Kerry, it's not playing for us.
Might have to share a different app, Kerry, in order for it to.
Okay. That's a pity, isn't it? Let's see, what can I do? So could you see it, but just not hear it? You couldn't see it either.
I couldn't see it either.
Okay. So can you see it here on this? Can you see something that says at the top, Chris Casillas? No.
No, I'm still seeing the hyperlink.
You'll have to switch.
Okay, so I've got to stop sharing and
then
start.
share the other app.
Right, okay. That's all right, here we go then. Let me see if I can take this back to the beginning. Can you see and hear it now? Yeah.
I see it. It's silent though.
Did you say it's not, you can't hear?
Can't hear.
Increase the volume down there. It doesn't, I don't think you have maximum volume.
Well, it looks as though it is.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Not sure.
Okay, well, it was a good idea. It's a good experiment that failed.
Will you put that hyperlink into the chat, please, so that we can go and have a listen for ourselves? That would be really good.
Yeah, certainly. Let's see if I can do that now. Hold on.
That would be cool to do. And we can put that in the session information as well, just so if people are coming to look at it afterwards, they can go and check on that link.
Okay.
Cool.
There we go. Let's just see if I can get back to where I was.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So am I back again, back to my
Yeah, you're back to your slide. Not in
Right.
presentation mode, but
Yeah, I'm just gonna, it just takes a while, doesn't it? There we go.
got it.
Okay, so you can listen to Chris talking about what he's been doing with us on that really short video afterwards in your own time. And if you've got any questions about it and you want to come back to us, that's really fine. So from one beginning, from a single community, what we're looking for is exponential growth. And we built into our program what we call see one, do one, teach one, SODOTO. So this is a kind of a pay forward scheme, where anybody that we are working with agrees to teach others. Yeah. And essentially we have a little story that we tell where we say that if you work with us, it's going to cost you $500. If you go and teach one other person, you bring one other person, your debt to us falls to $250, it halves. And if you can then show that that person that you taught has taught somebody else, it falls to $0. Okay, and of course I've got a little side system dynamics model of that, and I can't quite remember how many years it's going to take, probably beyond my lifetime, but yeah, this is long term. This is a long-term intervention. So basically, why am I here? Well, to tell you about that, but also to ask you to get involved yourselves. Yeah, we're looking for neighbourhood activists to be apprentices. Ideally, we're needing one for every neighbourhood. We're operating on a fair exchange principle on that. And the way you could help is either to become one yourself, you may already be one, or to identify activists in your neighbourhood or network that you could direct us towards or direct them towards us. And essentially, there's a whole set of links there. This is the Fed Wiki links, which I just had a few problems, obviously, working them with the share screen. But if you take a screenshot, I think this is probably going to be recorded. There's lots and lots of information on all of those links, or you can contact me directly on my email address or phone me. And just to finish off, I think this is a classic quote here. I noticed this quote on this girl's T-shirt at a workshop we were running in Spain last November. And it says, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that's what this is all about, helping others to create better futures together. There we go. That's all I have to say. It's basically any questions, any observations?
Who wants to stick a hand up? If you're not, I will, but would anyone like to start us off? Okay. Go on, Biddy.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you, Kerry. Very interesting model about the teach one and teach somebody else and come back. So yeah, very interesting, good insights. And I remember the horses that you talked about previously. So yeah, thank you.
I'm interested in Mark's point about vernacularizing the model.
Benjamin, can you speak up? You're a bit quiet.
Can you hear me now? Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, this headset is dodgy now, but it's so expensive. I don't want to admit it. I was interested in Mark's point about vernacularizing the models and about improving access and so on. So I suppose the obvious question is, what are the obvious? I just shared your horsey book on systems community of inquiry because I love the fact that we've got systems thinkers on horses and systems thinkers on soccer, which I had previous examples as well as the reference from today and so on and so on. But yeah, what are the things that people can pick up and share that might then link back into your organizing system?
Is that a question for Mark? Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
I'm not sure I understand the question yet. Just say
sorry,
it again.
I think you were talking about the same project, Mark, aren't you?
Oh yeah, we do this work together. Yes.
So the access and the models sound really interesting. And I'm wondering what are the ways in for people that we can share across the systems thinking world and beyond? Is it those links that you just shared, Kerry? If so, can you put them in the chat before the end of the session? What are the bits that people can grab hold of and fling out around the world that people can use and be interested in, and that might lead them back into your positive feedback loop?
Well, I mean, and Kerry can take a stab at that as well. I'm sort of a technologist, among other things. So our IT shop is run by Ward Cunningham, the guy who invented the wiki, and then the federated wiki. So we have a platform that is open source, Community Commons 4.0, and everything that we learn, all the tools, all the methods are being put in there. And much more importantly, what we need Chris and everyone else to do, because we can build the first iteration of vernacularized tools, I mean, as could anyone on this call. The real meat for the going forward are going to be lots of patterns, taking off on Mr. Alexander's work, but pattern languages of food and farming and governing and all the other things that neighborhoods do. We are able to show them and teach them and help them articulate those in a pattern template so they can be adapted and shared beyond. So in the end, if they don't do something that can be shared, just learning a bunch of models isn't going to go very far. So that's our offering is here, and we're inviting all of you guys to help. But their real opportunity is to share what they've learned and how they've learned it in a pattern language or a sequence of patterns so that other neighborhoods can use it. And that's all in the federated wiki. And we can put some links in there.
Thank you. Sally, you had your hand up right for a while.
Yes, yeah, I'm actually in your target market because I'm a community activist trying to I live in a very congested town in Surrey, congested with traffic, that is, trying to get more people walking and cycling. And just like you, we think that children is a good place to start. So we would like to and we've started talking to people in schools about whether because the schools are trying to get more people, get more of the kids turning up on their bikes and walking and avoid. I mean, most of the people in this town drive large SUVs. So anyway, but my question is, I saw Mark put in the chat about you use the Cynefin model, and I've noticed that Dave Snowden, who I sort of follow quite a lot and sit on webinars and things, he's extremely dismissive of causal loop diagrams because he says in a world of complexity, they are complete fiction.
Well, David's actually a friend of mine. He's been to my house and we've traveled together.
Oh, right. Okay. So
I think one can just say of David, and I love David, you can just say David is dismissive of everything. and that's his charm, if that charms you. And it definitely charms me.
Yeah, so you just kind of rub along.
Yeah, I mean, David has great things to offer, and he is a curmudgeon, and I think he's lovely. But, a lot of my friends can't stand him. But I don't take anybody's, when somebody says, I don't know what I'm doing, and I know I do know what I'm doing, that's just water off a duck's back. Couldn't care less.
Good. Okay, that makes me feel a lot better.
So maybe there's a piece of taking curmudgeons with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, I was about to. I mean, I would. I've been meaning to draw one of these diagrams for myself on this active travel problem. I have a lot of other distractions at the moment, but every time I hear Dave say, make his comments, I think, oh, am I doing the right thing here? So I'm reassured by your comment.
Ignoring, use what feels interesting.
Yeah.
See where it takes you.
Yeah, because I do like the Cynefin model as well.
Yeah, I mean, and Chris, I'll just say, Chris found me because of a talk that I had put online for Pele Brunel on my take on the viable system model. And he said, this is the first time I've been able to understand it. And, you know, John Walker and Elena Leonard and you know, Angela Espinosa, you know, Asby, Robin Asby, these are all colleagues and friends of ours, but I don't call it dumbing it down because that's dismissive of the work that it takes to vernacularize something. So, you know, everyone on this call has had the experience, I assume, to have the time, the money, the education to use the very unvernacularized versions. And if we're going to give something to our children, it's going to have to be in a language they understand. And that's real work.
I think that also comes out of the session Alison ran for us at the beginning. So, you know, having to
Absolutely
ways to communicate it.
One quick question. I met somebody interesting last Friday who's the chair of the Forest Schools Association in the UK. She is also very keen to transform the education system to get children more interested in nature. And I wondered if you'd come across her because they're clearly got a common goal.
Sounds like a possible recruit, Sally.
Sorry?
Sounds like a possible recruit.
Yeah, Sarah Lawful, her name is.
Right.
Interesting.
Could you put your email address in the chat, please, Sally?
Yeah, I could email her and say, would you be interested? I've only just met her, so I don't, you know, don't know how quickly she'd reply.
Yeah, Sally, if you can do that, that'd be great. Can I move on to Claudius? Has also had his name, his hand up for a little while. It'd be nice to hear from him too.
So my take in the initiative is really based on two key elements. And the first one is the idea of relocalizing creativity, enabling the neighborhoods to rediscover their agency. And that's such a mind shift. And so the initiative to relocalize creativity is a breakthrough initiative just to change that mind shift. And the other one relates to the idea of cave drawings and Campfire. It is the capacity to facilitate that space. And the cave drawing notion is to see the system as you introduced it, Kerry. So I think that initiative of helping folks to rediscover their agency in a world where the institutions are still operating in a paradigm that has passed its sell-by date is critical. But there is a caveat. And that caveat is a long talk by Yuval Harari, who says half of the world's population is going to be in massive cities. And we need governance of those. If we fall back into communities, we're actually looking at the ideal breeding ground for gangsters and warlords and criminal activities. We need institutions. Now, I know that you've been thinking about this. And so the question is, what is the scalability of agency? How do you scale that up from the local neighborhood all the way through to the governance that the globe needs in terms of our globally shared issues that we need to address? I know it's a big question, but I think it's a core question.
Well, I think it is a big question, and scale is a key issue. And of course, Beer and others gave us the big clue, which is nested recursions, and so did Ostrom. But the guy who's got my attention, and Kerry and I went and spent a few days with Robin and his wife in Wales, is Robin Asby. I just put a link in there. His publisher gave us permission to publish chapter 8 and the preface. I encourage you to buy the book. But he's the only guy I've come across, and it's he's a good friend of Beer's. Used to drive him to London regularly for 15, 20 years. He took his insights, and he's a physicist and a mathematician and a systems teacher. He took his understanding and actually made it quite explicit about how government would work across scales. And maybe if you guys feel like it and you invite me back anytime in the future, I can share the work we're doing on that with Chris, because we've taken exactly Robin's stuff, and I didn't use it until I went, and it's time to talk with him face to face. But I think Robin is cracked he's given us the next key, to move forward to answer your question in very practical terms. And so Chris is a very practical guy.
There's a really great presentation, by the way, from Robin that I've put the link in the chat, where he did a session in a SCiO meeting about designing democracy using a VSM perspective. It's absolutely fascinating, very, very interesting. If you're thinking about democracy and communities as well, and how.
Yeah, I would love to. I just joined this group because somebody nudged me to, pay the £30. But I would love to have a small subgroup of this group and talk about Robin's work, get Robin to come, because if we can't scale democracy from the household all the way to the world, we're going to be dominated by the upper levels of government because they have no connection to the requisite variety in homes.
Yeah. Well, there's a thing called a common interest group, Mark. So if you want to set one of those up,
okay,
go and have a look at what you need to do, and then we'll try and help you do it.
Okay, great. And I'll talk to Robin as well.
I put something in the chat as well, so you can see what a SIG is and how we regard a SIG in SCiO and how you get it started.
Okay, I will take that seriously.
I have one question for you, Kerry, because I was just conscious that we talk about communities, and I'm actually a kind of a formal member of one community and an informal member of another, and these are not sort of necessarily down to my town or my my village or my city, but it's a community. The communities practice a bit like this. One of them is orchardists. They're very interested in nature and agroforestry. And the other one is market gardeners. And obviously you can imagine there's a crossover between the orchardists and the market gardeners as well. And they're they're both interested in community, nature, food system, that sort of thing. Do these communities have to be physically located ones, or can they be communities of practitioners or people who have a passion about something? Or does it matter?
I'm going to say something. I'm going to speak for Mark here because I've heard this phrase said so often, this sentence. Mark, I mean, I don't know, I don't think he's told anybody, but he was a very high-ranking doctor in America and made some massive innovations in American healthcare. But he told me this. He said that health is a dynamic, emergent property of face-to-face interactions in a neighbourhood. And I think that is maybe what you need to hear.
But I'll back off on that a little bit. I mean, yes, that's absolutely right. And I think that one should, whenever one can have face-to-face interactions, because as Snowden and a lot of other people tell you, you can know a lot more than you can say. And, Zoom, we're getting pretty good at this, watching faces, and why Kerry wanted to see your faces. But in an ongoing fashion where you can keep pointing at your co-created cave drawing so that the conversations have continuity and you can read what people are afraid of and anxious, all this stuff we read subliminally in every moment we're with another person. That variety, that understanding of the situation is worth a lot. So, but to your other point, Robin convinced me just in writing his book that I shouldn't be so totally bound to the idea of neighborhoods. And he uses the word community for every scale of government. And I think that that's right. And then I'll say this one last thing. The person who has influenced my thinking more than anyone else in the last couple of years is a very dead lady named Mary Parker Follett. And she has convinced me that everything I do from now on has always got to, in every moment, be pointed toward creating the whole in the part. Creating the whole in the part. Every conversation, every meeting, everything should be judged by, does it just create stronger parts, or is it done in such a way that each individual can see the same whole but from different perspectives and then can act from that? Robin gets that, she gets that, and now I get it. So that's going to color everything I do from now on.
Interesting. Thank you, Mark. It's not a name I know that much about, so I put a wiki up in the chat. I think the
Yeah, that's
I think-
Wikipedia, and I put her book, which Ward Cunningham, the guy who invented the wiki, actually did me a favor, and he incorporated it. I'll just put it in there again, and put it in the Fed wiki. And unfortunately, this one's got all my markups, so I apologize. I'll go create a clean one if anyone wants one, but I'll put this in there right now. I think I shared it earlier with my recent insight about the whole in the park. So I'll do that again.
I think one I'd add to it, and I've just thrown it into the chat again, is Kerry, if you're interested in kind of urban communities, would be Jane Jacobs.
Yeah.
As a massive urban activist and kind of community, mobilizer.
And in certain places, Boston and New York, and I, I think in European communities, there are really strong neighborhoods.
Mm.
I think Amazon is doing more than anything on earth to kill neighborhoods.
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone stays in their house and gets trucks to drive stuff to their front door. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, interesting. Any other questions?
If you have, relatively young, meaning not my age, community activists that are actually out doing stuff, and they have some experience under their belt, I would like to introduce them to Chris, because Chris is our link to the real world, because neither Kerry nor I are community activists.
I know local community activist who's quite well.
Can't hear you now.
Oh,
Playing up again, Benjamin. Bite the bullet, buy another one.
Say again, Benjamin.
Is it better now?
A little bit.
Sorry. For what purpose? I know some community activists. What would be the link in? What should I say to them if I was offering them the connection?
Well, maybe give them a link to this talk, and maybe even better, show them the link. I just put up earlier. I put a YouTube that they just created in the last couple of days, the last year's work in Chris's neighborhood. So if that doesn't interest them, they won't be interested in anything else, because it's actually the results of the last year. And he doesn't, nor do we encourage him to talk about what role we have. We try to stay in the background. But his causal loop diagram, Kerry taught him how to do causal loop diagramming in a week. And then he did a board retreat, and that causal loop diagram has driven that strategy, and that diagram, which is on the wall, has driven everything they've done in the last year.
Interesting. Very interesting.